So, Michelle Price, you're the Director of Community Engagement at the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. How long
Yes.
have you been in this role?
Actually, just over a year. I started April 1st of 2019.
Okay, so you've had your 1 year anniversary already.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Um, so, looking at your profile, I saw that you've kind of been working in the suicide prevention field for like a decade now.
Oh my God. Yeah, almost. It's
Okay.
in late 2011, and I started as a suicide prevention educator in my home county of Delaware. And I did school programming for suicide prevention in all the schools in a two-county area. I then ended up managing that program, and then I ended up at OSPF.
Hey, wow. So when I was talking to Derek Longmire in a previous episode with the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio, I always find it really interesting how you guys at the top of the prevention field, how you came into this role. Like, did you know going into college, this is what I wanted to do? And for him, he's known since middle school. So, how did you come to know you wanted to be in prevention?
My story is probably going to be the exact opposite of Derek's. So I had no idea that I was going to fall into the prevention field. I went to college and got a degree in comparative religion because I wanted to learn about world cultures, and religion had always fascinated me because it's such an important part of people's lives. So my initial plan would have been to become like a PhD and teach at a college and be a talking head on the History Channel or something, but academia just didn't agree with me. So um, I had just graduated from college, and my mom was serving on our local suicide prevention coalition. She was a police officer here in Delaware, and she said, "Hey, there's this organization, and they're going to start going into the schools and teaching about suicide prevention." And the reason she had mentioned it is because I have my personal experience with depression, anxiety, with suicide ideation, and I've moved through it. I still struggle with it, but it's something I'm familiar with. And she thought that my compassion and my empathy combined with my personal experience would be a great way to reach out to kids. And so I applied and I got the job. And even then, I wasn't quite sure if prevention was where I wanted to stay. But especially once I started to manage the program, once I started to manage that program is when I was like, this is where I want to stay. And I didn't know exactly where I would be able to go because I just only really experienced prevention at this very local level. I wasn't aware of the larger prevention field. And within about a year before I started at OSPF, I started to become more and more aware of that field and the state entities that are doing all that work. And then I was like, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So it was a slow progression, but it's a personal passion of mine, and now it's a professional passion of mine.
And you said that your mom, she was it a school resource officer? Was it a police officer?
She had been an on-duty police officer for years, but then she transitioned to be the community relations officer.
Okay.
So that's what she was doing.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first thing I did, or the first conference I went to when I started my job with Envision Partnerships, was the conference up at OSPF.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, that was my first big conference. I'd never gone to one before, and it was just I was like, wow, like this is definitely I'm in the right place, and
Yeah.
you and Tony are just amazing, and we had that option to go to one of the press conferences, and you guys got buses for all of us, and
Yeah.
we bussed on over there, and I remember you went up to the stand and you started talking about your own personal experience, and
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us standing there had no idea that you have been through this, and you have a personal relationship with it. So, having that personal experience in a field as sensitive as this, do you believe that's been a strength for you?
I do. I think that when you're talking to anybody in the public, they know if you're just blowing air, you can know a lot about something academically speaking, but until you've experienced it, I still think that there's an element of connectedness that you don't have with your audience. But if you've experienced it, you'll touch somebody in their heart in a way that's different than somebody who has just an academic knowledge of it, or a book knowledge of depression or suicide or prevention and things like that. And for me, I feel like it helps me be more of an authentic presenter and connect to people in a more personal way. So they're not coming up to me after a presentation and asking me questions about what I presented on. They're usually coming up to me and saying, wow, I've experienced this. And sometimes I'll sprinkle tiny bits of my story throughout my presentation, and they'll say, I never would have known, just like you said. I never would have known that you experienced this. And knowing that someone else struggles but can still get up here and talk like this, it gives me hope. And so for me, I find it a strength. But I do think that if you are in this field and you struggle with mental illness, or especially suicidal ideation, you just need to be as aware of yourself as possible. So you know when you need to take a step back. Like Tony knows, my coworkers know that I struggle, and if I start to get into a headspace where I feel like I'm falling into a deeper depression, or if I've thought about suicide, I let them know, because I want to be transparent, but I also want them to understand why I might not be functioning at my highest at that moment. And I think that people appreciate that transparency and that authenticity.
And I think you're also surrounded by people that understand more than most organizations would.
Yeah. And if there's one thing that I think can be, and not in my particular case with the people around me, but I know that the first time I ever had to call a hotline for myself, it was years ago when Robin Williams died by suicide. And I was having a really hard time personally, and that just kind of enhanced what I was going through. I felt a lot of shame, and I felt a lot of like, I should know better. I shouldn't be feeling like this. I should have my stuff together. Why am I calling a crisis line? I should know, you know what I mean? There was just a lot of this, you do this for a living, you should be better, but that's not true. All of us who struggle with any kind of mental illness, I mean, it's a mental illness. You don't always have complete control over it. And it's okay to struggle. And reaching out was the smartest thing I could have done. And I think that sometimes as people in the field, we're afraid to tell people that we're struggling, because people might succumb to the stigma that we're trying to eradicate anyway. We're just so afraid of that stigma because it's still so permissive in our culture. So it is still a barrier. It's something I have to mentally fight against, but yeah, it does still kind of peek its head in every once in a while.
When you were talking about Robin Williams there, I noticed you used the terminology die by suicide. And terminology is something that I think a lot of prevention agencies are starting to talk about. Why use the term die by suicide, and how are you kind of changing the culture of suicide to say that rather than other things?
Well, especially when we're in the public sphere, on videos like this, or doing presentations or speeches, or putting out materials, you really want to try to use language like we can keep it in. I don't know what you want to do. Okay, it's staying in. So you want to use language like died by suicide, or that someone had taken their life, someone killed themselves, because that is exactly what happened. When you use words like commit, it implies crime. It implies all of these different things like sin and shame, and that's not a story that we want to push out there. We want people to know that even if you're thinking about suicide, if you've thought about suicide, if you've attempted but you're still with us, there's no shame in that. And so we really try to avoid using words like commit. But I think that it's important to know too that if I'm speaking to somebody who lost their loved one to suicide, and they say, so and so committed suicide, I'm not going to correct them in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's not appropriate. And, I'm not just going to say, oh, no, we don't say that, because some people are okay with that terminology, but by and large, we want to use terminology like died by suicide, took their own life, or someone killed themselves to avoid that stigma.
So, I assume you guys deal with that quite a bit. When you're dealing with the media, and say you have an article written about the work you do, sometimes you see that terminology thrown in there. Is there anything you do at that point, or do you say, hey, in the future?
So, especially with media like news stations or newspapers and things like that, we do try to send them the recommendations that have been laid out on how to report responsibly on suicide. And it goes beyond just using the correct wording. I mean, it's about how you talk about the story. It's about not describing things in any kind of detail, trying really hard, or completely omitting the means in which the person died by, because that's not what's important. What's important is that somebody had lost their life to a mental illness that they had been struggling with. We try to send out that stuff to people, but I will tell you a funny story. I was watching local news months ago. I don't remember what station, but somebody had died by suicide, and they had said somebody died by suicide. They used those words. And I was with my family at the time, and I went, oh, and I got so excited, which is not the response you want to have to a story like that. But the reason I'm so excited is because the reporter used the correct language, and that is so important. And so I think that slowly but surely we are breaking down that barrier, and media are starting to use the correct wording.
Okay, and on your website, I haven't checked myself. Is there any page or anywhere people can go to learn a little bit more about that terminology and kind of the sensitivity around writing about this topic or talking about it?
Right now, there's not anything in particular. We're in the process of redoing our website.
Okay.
For more information, but there is a really great responsible messaging document that was written by John Ackerman from Nationwide Children's Hospital here in Ohio, along with people from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, Franklin County Lost. I mean, all these different organizations in Ohio, and it's actually published through the American Association of Suicidology. So that's something that I can get to you if you'd like, or we can post a link to that so that people can access it.
Yeah, we'd love to post some resources along with the episode so people can find that, and I think it'd be really helpful.
Yeah, that one's really great. And then we did a webinar recently on responsible messaging with John Ackerman and myself, and I could always send a link to that as well.
Is it still available?
Yeah, we have a website or a webinar archive on our website now.
Okay.
So, we have things that are kind of kept back so you can watch them and download the materials mentioned in the website or in the webinar. So that's cool.
Okay, we'd love to link to that too. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll send those to you after.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we've talked about your background, terminology, some of the challenges that come with the job. So as the Director of Community Engagement at OSPF, what does this look like, and what are the responsibilities that you have? So walk us through like a typical day for you.
There is no typical day, unfortunately.
That's what everyone keeps saying.
I think that sometimes I crave that structure, but other times when I'm bound to that structure, I get, ants in my pants and just move around. So I don't really have an everyday. My position is brand new. We created it out of necessity. We were hearing from coalitions across the state that they needed someone to connect with, someone to work with, someone to bring them together. And so we created this position, and we shifted some responsibilities around at the organization. So my job was born. And most of what I do, the heart of what I do, is directly working with local suicide prevention coalitions across the state, helping them build capacity, helping them connect, being the person that does bring them together, provides them with resources, and is the voice for coalition people when we're having these bigger state conversations. Because I think when people are in higher level positions, it's very easy. It's not intentional, but it's very easy for them to kind of forget that um, local view. And so it's my job to listen to what different counties around the state have to say and then bring that voice to the state leaders.
And that's no easy job because you are just always, reaching out, contact the level of communication that you have with everyone. Not just anyone can do that job, and you just do a great job. Kristen Smith, our suicide prevention coordinator here at Admission Partnerships, she leads the Butler County Suicide Prevention Coalition, and she's always Michelle this, Michelle that, and our coalition and so many others are so glad to have someone that can kind of lead the way navigating what resources can we use, where do we go from here. And we're especially excited for that new grant that was given out. So could you talk about the recent grant and what that means for all the coalitions that are involved?
Yeah, so as part of my position, I had mentioned that we want to build capacity for suicide prevention coalitions across the state. We have some coalitions in this state that are just on point. They could probably just run themselves and just be fine. But then there are others that are really struggling, and some that are just volunteer based. They have no funding. And so we want to bring everybody up to a level where we all have a basic foundation of prevention knowledge, how to run a coalition, how to engage with your community, etc. And so we came up with this initiative called the Strengthening and Sustaining Ohio's Suicide Prevention Coalitions Initiative. And unfortunately, that doesn't make a beautiful acronym. It's like, not very, doesn't really flow off the tongue. But that initiative is made to we have 17 coalitions right now, and Butler County is definitely one of them, involved in this. And we are working with them to do community readiness assessments, to really look into their coalition and what they're capable of now and what they could be capable of in the future, and finding out what your own personal strengths are as a coalition member and how you can use that to better fuel the efforts of your coalition. So we are working with Ohio University and the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services to put that on. And it's been extended a little bit in a very strange way because of the quarantine that we're all in, and we're doing a lot more things virtually. So it's kind of changed since we started at the beginning of the year. But this is something that we want to offer annually to coalitions, because we have 88 counties. I believe 73 of them are currently covered by a coalition. Some of them are one coalition for multiple counties, but most counties are just one coalition per county. And then we want to try to get coalitions in those other counties too that don't have anything. But eventually we'd like everyone to go through this process, receive this grant money, and enhance their capacity at the local level so that they can really make a difference with their communities.
And what does success look like at the end of this for all the coalitions?
Ooh. I think success is going to vary for each coalition. We have some coalitions that are very well established, and so I think their kind of success is going to look different than a coalition that might be restarting and still wants to work on writing a brand new strategic plan, and who are trying to get more people to sit at the table. So I think it's hard to really measure the success, but really it's about coming out of this process with skills that you didn't have before that, again, can enhance that work that you're doing in your community. So you're not just kind of pulling prevention out of a bag and throwing it against the wall and hoping that it sticks. You're doing prevention in a very systematic, well thought out way, and making sure that your community is even ready to hear that message. Because sometimes we work our butts off behind the scenes, but our communities are just like, don't want to listen to you. And that's a part of prevention, is making sure that we're putting out messages that our community is ready to hear. So I think that that's really what success is going to look like, but it is going to look different for each coalition.
Right, right. And something I've noticed right away, and it's not even the end of it, is just the networking that this has provided. You know, even though we've done only just done virtual stuff lately, we haven't been able to meet because of the stay-at-home order. Just the email list has probably what, like 50 plus people on it.
Yeah.
Communicating back and forth that just want to do better and be better for their coalition. And I know that our reach has grown in Butler County. People coming to our coalition meetings has grown, and I think that you kind of tying us all together in this has expanded our reach. And you know, being able to say, "Oh, look what like their coalition's doing. Look what their coalition's doing," has been really helpful. So it's exciting to see where else this goes.
That is exactly why I do this. I can't tell you, like, from a personal experience standpoint, I used to run a coalition, and it can feel very isolating when you don't know what's going on around you. Like I said, I lived in this local prevention bubble for years. I didn't know that other people were doing similar things. I thought everybody else had their stuff together, and I was the only one who didn't. But that's not true. That's not true in life, too. That's a life lesson, not just a coalition lesson.
Mm-hmm.
It's struggling, and everybody needs help, and that's okay. And to hear that just the simple networking is making a difference. I mean, I have like these little proud mama moments sometimes when I'm doing this work, and I think that's one of them is when I hear stories like that. Because in addition to this initiative, which is bringing coalitions together, we also have something that's open to everybody. It doesn't involve any grant money. It's called the Suicide Prevention Coalition Partnership. And that's just an opportunity to get everyone together, and everyone can share ideas. Everyone can talk about their struggles and just network. And we also want to provide some additional training as well, so that we can help build capacity in smaller ways. But yeah, that's amazing to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to see it grow, and hopefully other coalitions can join in the next time around. You said you were going to offer the grant again.
We'd love to.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to depend on funding, especially now they're talking about possibly funding getting cut after all of the COVID stuff, and we're not sure how that's going to affect anyone on our end. But yeah, this is something that we would like to continue to do over the years until all coalitions have built their capacity up to a point where, you know, they're self-sustaining. We can work together. Maybe we have some coalitions that are doing really well that can be mentors for others. I mean, my biggest mantra is, what do you need as a coalition, as a person? What do you need? And if I can give it to you, then I'll give it to you. If I can't, I'll try to figure out how to make it happen. Or I'll at least continue to be the voice and tapping people on the shoulder saying, excuse me, why don't we have this yet? People are asking for it. So that's, yeah.
You're the advocate for all.
I try.
Yeah, you do a great job.
Thank you.
Now, what are your concerns during COVID, if any, and the stay-at-home order? How does it affect people's well-being, and what are some things that they can do during this time?
So I guess my concern is the isolation. Connectedness is one of the strongest protective factors when we're talking about suicide. And when people are physically isolated, I think that connectedness starts to dwindle in some people. But there are also some folks who really are starting to feel like we're all strangely coming together, even though we're apart. And so I think that it's really hit and miss with how people are feeling. I know I've struggled with staying at home. I have a 22-month-old son who I have to watch. He's not here today because I had to do an interview. But you know, he's usually running around. It's hard to get work done. My stress levels are a little higher than normal. And, you know, some people are out of jobs. Some people don't have the money they used to. Some people don't have money at all. And let alone, if you do have the money, are you able to get the things that you need at the store? Because it's a little bit easier to find things these days, but it's still difficult. And it still brings like a tinge of sadness to me whenever I go to a store and I see that there's no toilet paper. I have plenty of toilet paper right now, but like, it's just like, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of unknown. And I think that's really what we have to worry about. But we can still connect. I have become so familiar with connecting this way with a camera. On my phone, I do FaceTime with my family so that my son can see his grandma and his uncle. And my mom just had this like little happy hour with her brothers and sisters who live in Illinois and Iowa. They did that yesterday on an app where it was just all of them. There's 7 of them, all of them on this app so that they can all just kind of have like this moment together. So I think connecting with people in ways that aren't traditional is key. Making sure that you get outside, or if you're afraid to go outside, open your windows, get some sunlight into your house when it's warm. Today it's a little bit colder. We got a beautiful taste of the 70s the other day, and then it's like,
Oh yeah.
But I mean, I think that things like that, as cliche as it sounds, is so important. And I have found that I feel so much better when I wake up. I take my shower, I put on my makeup, I put on regular clothes that I would wear to work, and I work from home. I don't just, sit around in my jammies all day, because if I did, then I might start to feel more depressed. So I think it's just trying to do things like that that are going to be the most helpful. And also, and I know this is hard for people who are struggling with mental illness, try not to be afraid to ask for help. A lot of people who struggle, especially with depression, perceive themselves to be a burden on the people around them. And it's like, well, I'm not going to ask you to go grocery shopping for me. How selfish of me. And that's like your inner monologue, but it's not selfish. And there are people out there who are just chomping at the bit to help their friends and family. So don't be afraid. It's not shameful to ask for help. And there are definitely people out there who want to help you. So that's what I would say for kind of a way to manage this. But also the last thing, I think that we need to think beyond where we are right now. What is this going to look like after? And I don't even know how to say this is over, because I feel like life isn't going to return exactly to the way it was. Our mindset is different. Things have changed, just our sense of self, our sense of community is different. So how do we move forward with that? How do we deal with this community trauma that a lot of people are experiencing after this? And there's fear of the economy going down or tanking or something like that. We don't have a lot of evidence about pandemics that show increased suicide rates, but there are studies that have shown that during an economic downturn, the suicide rates can increase. So we really need to focus not just on telling people the signs of suicide and telling them to get help, but we need to focus on things like the reason that people are stressed. So how do we help people get housing? How do we help people get the financial assistance that they need? How do we make people feel like it's safe to go outside again when it's okay to go outside again? How do we handle those things when this is all over? And if we prepare for that now, the transition will be a lot easier later.
And I think you hit the nail on the head with it being hit or miss with a lot of people. We've been having, I'm connecting with people like this. The only person I really see is my boyfriend and my dog. Yeah. But I have felt closer to my coworkers than I have when we're in the office. And most of them are school-based, so of course I never see them. But we'll have check-ins once a week, and we ask everyone, how are you doing? Some people are not taking it very well. They feel lonely. But, I really enjoy working from home. And so for me, it's not as bad. But I understand for other people, this is a lonely time. My grandpa, they're very at risk. So they're pulled up in their home, and little things you can do with formats like this. I take her on walks with me. We'll FaceTime her, and
That's such a good idea.
Yeah, and Just little things like that. The phone works both ways. I know she's not going to say, hey, can you send me a video of this? But taking the initiative and being, thinking about how other people are feeling and, some of those people that get lonely, some of those people that
Yeah.
are, yeah, that are locked up at home.
And get creative. I love that you're taking her on walks with you. That's such a good idea. And I know I've talked a lot about my personal experience, so I'm sorry to kind of drop another personal bomb, but right when this started, my father passed away. And we were expecting it, but it was still very sad. And it's still sad. But we couldn't have people over. People weren't dropping casseroles. People weren't, we didn't have a service. We're going to have one later, hopefully in the summer, but maybe in October. Um, and and that was really hard. But I had some friends who, like one friend bought me a gift card to DoorDash so that I could order food, them sending me food. I had another friend who just said, I'm putting together a little bag and I'm going to leave it on your door. Don't worry about answering it. I'm just going to text you and tell you it's there. That way we don't have to worry about touching or feeling weird because we can't hug. And she just gave me like little instant macaronis and some granola bars for my son and coloring books for my son. And she made me some homemade broccoli and cheese soup. And so, I mean, somebody else had sent my mom like one of those edible arrangements.
Oh, yeah.
So think of ways that you can reach out like that. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. Sometimes my neighbor knocked on my door the other day and apparently she has sensitive skin and she's like, hey, this toilet paper doesn't work for me. Do you want it? And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Of course.
I feel like this is like gold. So, I mean, even those little things where people are just like, here's a, something that you might need, no matter how small it is. Just reach out and be there for people. That is what we need to do. And I'm sorry, I get so excited.
Oh, you're fine.
We had this idea, and I don't know if people would love to do this. I think we should, because we feel so isolated, is do some sort of like statewide, neighborhood-wide, like happiness hour is what we're calling it, and from like 4 to 5, and especially on nice days, just like take your family out into your driveway or onto your stoop or your sidewalk and just sit there in some chairs, let your kids or your animals run around, or let your kids draw on the sidewalk with chalk, and just have like some snacks and some popcorn and some drinks, and just hang out. And if everybody came out of their houses at that time and did that, and talked long distance and kept that physical distance apart, I think that's important. And I've heard a lot of this, and I'm sorry if I'm really harping on this, but we use the word social distancing, and in Ohio we're really doing a good job. I mean, I know that there are some people who might not be following the rules, but we're doing a great job. But I don't like the term social distancing. I like the term physical distancing, because socially we still need to be able to speak, we still need to be able to interact, but as long as we're keeping that physical distance and we're taking care of each other in that way, there's no need for us to be antisocial. We need to be with each other, but just in unique and different ways.
You're absolutely right. This just because we're physically, distanced doesn't mean we can't be socially connected. So, getting outside, doing everything that you can do, all the little stuff counts. Now, how have suicide rates in Ohio changed over the course of the past 10 years since you've basically been in this field? What are some trends you've noticed?
Well, generally suicide is up. We're seeing it go up by a few hundred pretty much every year. I think it's gone from somewhere around 1,100 or 1,200 when I started per year to the last time we had complete data, it was 2018, I think, and it was 1,836, so 1,800. And so it's definitely increasing. In Southeast Ohio, you're going to see a lot more of the higher rated states. And rate is based on population. So that's important to note. I think that it's still important to focus everywhere in the state, but Southeast Ohio definitely struggles more with even just physical isolation, easier access to means, a culture of stigma that's might a little bit stronger than maybe somewhere else in Ohio. So they're really struggling down there. The other thing that we're seeing is men. I mean, people think that women are, more prone to suicide or attempting and things like that. Now, women do attempt more than men, but men are dying by suicide 4 times more than women. So we really need to focus on our men, and in particular, our middle-aged men, and see how we can help them get the help that they need. And another alarming trend that we're seeing right now is that the young Black community, young Black males, are having a very steep increase within the past 2 or 3 years. And when you look at that rate compared to other rates, you might still think, oh, well, that's so low. But the increase is shockingly steep. And so we do need to focus on our younger Black males, particularly like late high school, kind of early 20s, college age males. So, what's going on there? How can we address that? How can we help? Especially with the young Black male population, I think that what we're seeing, what I've heard anecdotally from people in that community, is increasing racial tension is a big contributing factor. I think that there's also less access to services, easier access to lethal means and things like that. But I do think, the spike has happened within the last, I think I said 2 or 3 years. And so I think that increasing racial tension, increasing political tension and things like that is contributing to this. I'm not aware right off the bat of studies that have been done about that, but this is just what I've heard anecdotally from the Black community. So those are the big trends. The other one that I'll mention too, and this doesn't quite apply everywhere in Ohio, but there are several big cities in Ohio that have large populations of refugees. And a lot of those refugees are having problems adjusting to life in America, be that culturally, financially, whatever that is. And we're seeing, particularly, at least in Columbus, the Bhutanese community, their rates are going up very high. And so, how can we focus on our refugee community? The same blanket gatekeeper training isn't necessarily going to translate, especially to refugees, but let alone other people. Like, what speaks to people in Southeast Ohio might not speak to the same people in like Cleveland. People who are refugees are going to hear our messages and it'll sound different than maybe somebody who was raised in America their whole life. So how do we get our prevention to fit those populations? I think that's something that we need to think about. And I think it's important to note that as a white woman, I can't directly speak to, what's happening in the Black community because I'm not of that community. But I do think that when you're talking about any group that you are not a part of, you need to go to the people that are part of that group and ask them what they need. Don't assume you know what they need. And I think one of the things that I hear a lot is like no representation about us without us. So I'm not going to sit here and speculate what might be the problem. I'm going to ask people, what are you seeing in your communities? And so anecdotally, I can say that based on what I've heard. But I think that we need to talk more with people living in that community and also do some studies to find out exactly what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So you talked about gatekeeper training. For anyone who doesn't know about the different suicide prevention programs in the state, what are some that are available to both youth, some that are available to adults, QPR, all that?
Yeah, QPR was going to be the first thing off my lips. So QPR is so hot right now, and it stands for Question, Persuade, Refer. It's just a very basic way to, address suicide as the public health problem that it is, and then talk about how to talk to somebody who is suicidal and how to get them to the proper resources. So it's a really great basic training to do for anybody in the community. You don't have to have a degree or anything. It's just if you are in touch with people, you should take this training. There are also other trainings that take a little bit longer. So QPR can be like 1 hour to 2 hours. There are longer trainings like mental health first aid. There's a youth component. There's also an adult component. And it really breaks down not just suicide, but mental health in general and all of the different mental health issues that people struggle with. How to help somebody who might be in that moment of, you know, in the depths of their depression or in the middle of a psychotic episode. Like, what do you do in those moments? How do you get that person the help that they need? And so mental health first aid is a really good one as well. But the Signs of Suicide program is another one that we do, and not OSPF doesn't do it, but is across the state in various schools. Sometimes schools themselves are able to do it. Other times outside organizations come in and do it for them. But it is a program that, again, teaches students how to act. The acronym is ACT. So how do you acknowledge that your friend is struggling? How do you show them that you care? And then how do you tell a trusted adult? And it really drives that point home. It's kind of like QPR, but a little bit different. Mm-hmm. The best part about Signs of Suicide is that there's a screening component to it. And that screening component helps students to get identified as struggling with depression or suicide or not. And then those students are able to be seen by counselors and get the help that they need. So Signs of Suicide is a really great program.
Can people find more information about these programs on your website, or should they go to the actual curriculum websites?
So Signs of Suicide right now, I would say to go to their website. If you look up Signs of Suicide school program on Google, you'll be able to find it very easily. And then for QPR and for mental health first aid, we have plenty of information on that on our website.
Okay, perfect. I will add that to the resource page. Okay, so how can people get more involved in suicide prevention that maybe aren't prevention specialists or in the field themselves?
I think some of the best ways for people to get involved in suicide prevention, first is to educate yourself a little bit. I mean, you don't have to be a preventionist like Maddie was saying, but look into responsible messaging. What does that look like? If you want to be the kind of person who shares your personal story publicly to help inspire people or help people, how can you do that in a responsible way? So there are ways to do that and there are ways to not do that. But I also think that getting in contact with your local suicide prevention coalition is a huge first step. And through that, you can find information on all the coalitions on our website. We have a coalition tab, and if you drop down, you can look up all the coalitions in the state and find your coalition. And if there's no information for your county on there, then you can look at your local ADAM board or your mental health and recovery services board, and they should have the information on your local suicide prevention coalition. And then the other way, and this isn't commonly talked about, but there are call centers all over the state. And sometimes you can do things there on a volunteer basis. Sometimes they're hiring for people to work on those lines. But I know that some people, they want to do more than, sit at a meeting and help with events and, get flyers out to the community and things like that. They really want to talk to the people. So I would recommend looking into your local suicide prevention hotline and see if there's any kind of opportunity there for you to volunteer or to maybe even get hired.
Okay. And of course, get trained in QPR.
Yes, QPR is huge. I think everybody should have to go through it, and just to get a reminder of it every once in a while is really healthy. I still need to remind myself of those steps when I talk to someone who's suicidal. So it's not something that always comes easy, but it's a really great resource.
It is. And then, you're not asking people to sit for a few days through a course, 90 minutes to save a life. That's what we always say.
Yeah.
So Kristen Smith is always offering QPR trainings, and now the QPR Institute is now allowing virtual trainings during this time. So that's really exciting to talk about too. Okay, do you have anything else to add? I know we've covered quite a bit.
We really did.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay. All right. So now to end the show, with interviews, we always end with a fast five. So, 5 fun questions for you to answer.
And I have to be short and succinct. Don't just like, talk your ear off, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
So, what is one fun fact about you that not many people know?
That not many people know. I used to want to be a storm chaser, and I still kind of do.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Which is
crazy.
not very. I like science, but I can't really apply science, and so that's probably why I didn't go for it.
Interesting. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
I always say invisibility, but people think that that's creepy. But I think that that's really
I
sometimes.
would choose that. That's what I always say.
Yeah, invisibility. And honestly, I don't know why, but invisibility.
Sounds pretty cool. I think so too.
I'm a Harry Potter fan, so maybe that's why.
I've never seen Harry Potter.
I'm not going to judge you.
Okay. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I feel like I know this is kind of lame, but when I went to South Carolina, I just loved it. I felt like that was home for some reason.
Aw.
Being near the beach and the trees and the all of those, what are they called? The moss hanging off the trees. What are those trees called?
Weeping Willows?
No, they're not weeping willows. They're just like something oak trees. Someone will know what I'm talking about.
We'll find it. We'll find it.
Anyway, but those trees and being near the warm Atlantic Ocean, I think that'd be nice. But I'm just afraid of hurricanes.
Oh, yeah.
Then I'll say if I wanted to move somewhere like foreign, I would say either Ireland or Paris, France.
Oh, I could go for Ireland.
Oh, I want to go to Ireland so bad.
My grandparents went there for their honeymoon. So
I'm jealous.
Yeah, me too.
Really
Um, so when are you the happiest? And that you can answer that both professionally and personally.
Professionally happiest when I'm with coalition people. And that's just as simple as that. I just love the coalition. So I'm happy a lot of the time at work because of that. At home, right now I'm happiest when I'm with my son and when he's just talking. I love seeing him grow and become his own little person and use sentences. And I'm just like, you're the smartest human being in the whole world. And so I get really happy when I'm around him.
Oh, that's so cute. What's his name?
Jackson.
Jackson.
With a CK, not with an X.
As it should be, right?
Well, it's common spelling, but a lot of people are using the X now.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, I haven't seen that yet. Huh. And now, last question. What are your Easter plans?
I have it for my son, so we're going to, he's going to have his little Easter basket, and I am seeing my mom sometimes still, and she has 16 acres, so we're probably going to, if it's nice, go there and put some eggs in the yard, and it'll be her, Jackson, and me, but still, and if we can't, then I'll probably just hide eggs around the house and have him do that. And my mom has chickens, so at the very least, I'll get free eggs and be able to do some like dip dyeing of eggs.
Oh, that would be fun. I haven't done that in a long time.
Now that I have a kid, like all those things are starting to come back. And so he's old enough, I think, that it would at least be fun for him. If he doesn't understand what it is, he'll still be happy to be doing something.
But most of all, it's fun for you.
Yeah, I just love it.
Well, it was great talking to you. Thanks for setting aside a big chunk of your time today. I know we said a half hour, but you were just a wealth of knowledge. And
Yeah.
I hope we can do this again. No, you do not. No. Everyone loves you. We could all just sit down and listen to you talk all day.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
appreciate that.
Yeah, you stay healthy. Have a great Easter. And we will all talk soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Michelle. Take care.